you trans people, you call everybody a Nazi. It's like, yeah, if you align with the values of Nazis, then you're a Nazi. If you're saying the rhetoric of that group and then you get called that word that describes that group, you can't be surprised. If I'm saying I was born male and now I'm closer to female and I actually express my gender identity as a woman, and then someone comes along, oh, you're a trans woman, and I'm like, I'm not a trans woman. It doesn't make sense. In Germany, we have our right-wing political party, the AfD, the thing that Elon Musk really likes. One of the main faces of that party is a lesbian woman. She is a woman who is married to another woman. They live in Switzerland, so nothing that they do in Germany affects her and her wife. And then people are like, as like a lesbian woman, as a queer woman, why do you back up a party that wants to get rid of gay marriage? Because you had your gay marriage. Like, how does that make sense? And she's like, I'm not queer. I live with a woman. I'm married to a woman. I'm not queer. You dumb bitch. You're so stupid. You yourself would be part of the group that would be affected if you lived in Germany. The fascist party that you are a part of, that you speak out for, it doesn't like you. It's the same with like conservative or like Republican like trans people or like gay people. They believe that like this term, the term gay, the term trans, the term queer, it has like negative connotations to it because of like right-wing propaganda and whatnot. So the people who like that label describes don't want to be associated with that label because they're like, oh, there's so much negativity with it. It's the same with like furries, you know, like, oh, I don't want to be a furry because I'm not a zoophile. I don't actually want to smash animals. That's not what a furry is. You're believing the lies of like outsiders who are like using that label in order to like hate. It's the same with like anime. The label has been like hijacked by people who are just like using it as like an insult. If you're gay, it doesn't mean you're a groomer and whatnot, because being gay has nothing to do with that. It doesn't have anything to do with like child predators. That's like me being like, oh, you're Christian? Okay, you probably the child. It doesn't really work. It's just with like these minority, with like these niche labels, because like this ignorance and whatnot, where people just don't know anything about the community. They just see, oh, danger, 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 and they believe the fear mongering, and then it just like escalates. So the people who are like in these conservative, in these right-wing spaces, who fit the descriptor queer, gay, trans, and whatnot, they don't want to be associated with the trans community. They don't want to be associated with the LGBTQ community. They're stuck in this echo chamber, so they think everything of this community is actually bad. Everyone who's woke has blue hair and they're screaming about pronouns and whatnot. No. Actually, the people who are screaming about pronouns are right-wing incels who are confused that they have the option to pick between she, her, he, him, or they, them, or it, it's. Like, they have the ability to choose, so they throw their tantrum and they're like yelling about it. It's like on Twitter, this guy Grums. Every time you have like a person who is like a developer and on their bio are the words he, him, she, her, they, them, he throws a tantrum. And it's the same with like Asmongold. He's also drifting more and more into this right-wing stuff. It's like, oh yeah, I just want to be politically neutral and I want to see all sides of the coin. Your anti-DEI stuff, your anti-woke thing, that is like extremely right. That is far right stuff. And you echoing that back and amplifying it with your audience, that means you're not politically neutral because you don't want to hear out what is actually happening in reality. That is why people call you the king of incels. Just like Elon Musk is like, oh yeah, I want Twitter to be politically neutral. And then he suppresses leftist stuff and amplifies right-wing stuff. And then people call him a Nazi, a fascist. And he's like, well, I'm not that. I'm neutral. I'm center. Like, no, you're not. It's the same with like what Trump does to like Kamala, where he was always like, oh, the radical leftist. If you look at Kamala Harris's policies and whatnot, and you compare it to the politics of other nations, of other countries, you would realize that Kamala is actually center right. Is actually where the Republican Party was, where they used to be. America doesn't have a left wing, but they still fearmonger about it, and they use like these labels and fill it with misinformation and hatred, so it gets hijacked and and doesn't actually describe what it means. Right-wingers and fascists being like, oh, did you know the Nazis? Actually, they are socialists. They are socialists. They are leftist. It's like, no. It's sad to see people in the LGBTQ community, or like who fit the description of LGBTQ, don't want to be associated with the community because they believe all these lies, and they have to fear for their lives. If their conservative family find out that they are part of the LGBTQ, they're going to get sent to conversion therapy that doesn't work and it's just abuse. It sucks to be part of the minority. If you're neutral to it, you're enabling this trans genocide that's happening. And yeah, that's a big word. Oh, genocide. Oh, that's a big word. Oh, trans people haven't been killed. Yeah, they have. And like trans people being eradicated through like the history books. People don't want to talk about trans people existing. As a German person in history, I had World War II multiple times. Never did they say that the Holocaust also affected gay people, trans people. He's just not giving you the full picture. Gives you the idea that these people didn't exist because you didn't learn about them in history. You didn't learn about the difference of gender and biological sex in 3rd grade, so it doesn't exist. It must be wrong. It must be something new. It's dangerous. It's scary because a lot of the issues that we have is because people don't talk about the existence of trans people, like teachers. That's why a lot of right-wingers, or pretty much all right-wingers, are like, you can't tell children about LGBTQ people. Why not? Why can't I make a book, make a children's book, and a man is marrying a woman in it? Why can I show this, but I can't show a man marrying a man? Why is that sexual? Why is that deviant? Why is that gross and unnatural? Like, it happens in nature. If I show you 2 orcas banging and both of them are male, then that's just how it is. That's just how the majority of animal species are. And the same goes with trans people. Like, they don't even want trans people to be teachers. And then people come along and they're like, oh no, trans genocide, that actually doesn't happen. Actually, you're overreacting and your rights are not being taken away. But if someone finds out that I'm trans, or they think that I don't look like a woman enough and I don't fit into their worldview, chances are pretty high they're going to be violent and beat me up. Oh, discrimination doesn't happen because trans people are a protected group. It's like, it still happens. Discrimination still happens at the workplace. And it's really difficult to prove that in front of a court, in front of a judge. And with like discrimination, it's like, oh yeah, you just weren't qualified enough. Oh, someone was better. I know you have more experience and you do a better job and you have to put in more effort and whatnot, but actually they are better. So you didn't get a promotion this time. It's really difficult to prove that there's discrimination happening. And like misogyny, the same. Like, oh, women are a protected group. We have equality. No, actually we don't. And it's also insane to be like, oh yeah, you got fired from McDonald's. You have evidence that there's discrimination. Why don't you go to court? Do you know how expensive that is? Do you know how much time, mental distress and whatnot that's going to take? I don't want to spend like 5-8 years in court. We freed the slaves. Racism doesn't happen anymore. Yeah, it's so weird to me. You like highlight these social issues and it's like, oh, you woke people. Oh, you have first world problems and nothing is ever good enough for you. You always want war. It's like, oh my god. But they want equal rights. It's like, oh, nobody had issues with trans people before you were publicly trans and came out of the closet and wanted to be represented in society with like movies and whatnot.